Bandits! Air shouted, sliding down from her mount, her hands already aglow with her own magic. Dorian had known she must be a mage, but as he too dismounted, pulling a dagger from a sheath at his hip, he guessed what kind. With a wizard there would be a distinct crackle in the air, a rush of ambient magic being drawn to the woman or man who would wield it. A druid would cause nearby birds to call out, and the trees might seem to lean in as if listening for orders. No, with air he could feel the sweet glow of a gentle warmth. A healer, he guessed. This was made more certain when the first bandits appeared and she did not send a ball of elemental magic hurtling their way. What did go flying towards the new enemy was Garvin. He launched himself from his horse, which the animal was clearly accustomed to as he leaned to accommodate his master's motion. The shirtless giant hurled himself towards 3 surly-looking men who had skulked out of the tree line towards the road. They gazed up in horror as Garvin pulled the axe free from his belt and wielded it with alarming speed. Dorian cocked an eyebrow. He had been readying himself to aid the man with his magics, but now he felt as if this would be unneeded. Surprisingly, Garvin did not slice all 3 bandits in half with one swing of his axe, but instead stood before them more mountain than man. He growled threateningly, glowering at them from under thick brows. "I am the Sheriff of Heim, and Barbarian of the Guild of Heroes. What do you think you're doing attacking me and mine on this protected highway?" The 3 bandits seemed unable to speak. Dorian leaned over to Air, who was resting casually against her horse. He's the Guild Barbarian and the Sheriff of Heim? Heim was the capital city in which the guild was housed. He is, Air nodded, smiling as she folded her hands primly. Has been for some years. He does an excellent job. Do you see those? She gestured to Garvin's waist. Dorian's eyes went wide. Are those hands hanging from his belt? The hands of thieves. He insists on wearing them around when he goes outside the guild. It adds to his ferocious persona. She checked one of her fingernails with obvious disinterest in the scene playing out before them. The bandits seemed to have found their voices and were now tripping over one another to explain themselves. Dorian tried not to laugh aloud. Perhaps he was going to enjoy working with these people after all. Dorian yelped as pain sliced through his shoulder. He turned, seeking the source of the sharp agony. A dagger was lodged into his shoulder blade. He looked up to see that they were now surrounded by bandits. One was standing nearest, still in his stance from throwing the dagger. Air tensed, her blue eyes suddenly hard as flint. "Cover me," she barked, her ladylike tone gone as if it had never been. She reached for her saddle and pulled a weapon free. Dorian's eyes went wide. She was wielding a shillelagh in one hand and calling white magic to her other. If Dorian had expected this woman to rush to his side with healing and a soft voice, he was disappointed, because instead she launched herself towards the enemy, shouting, "I said cover! Where's my cover, Bard?" "Right," Dorian said, clearing his head, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. The dagger had dropped free into the snow. Behind him he could hear Garvin begin to fight as well, and it was a horrifying sound of shattering bone and screams of death that made Dorian determined not to turn around and watch. Instead, he moved with the healer, getting clear of the horses who bunched together protectively, glowering at the foes around them. Dorian snapped his fingers, getting a feel for the sound vibrations. The musical magic he could wield. It was strange to have everything so muffled by snow. He whistled a few bars, gathering magic to himself, then hurled several bandits back before they could attack Air. The healer swung her shillelagh with surprising force and leveled a bandit with one blow. Dorian hissed as the man's head gave a horrible crunching sound. With her other hand, Air cast, flicking her wrist and freezing a bandit in place. "Kill that one," she ordered, carrying on with her own slaying. Dorian acted instinctively at her words, stabbing his dagger into the frozen bandit's throat. The man let out a gurgle as he died, still held upright by Air's magics for several moments more before he finally crumpled to the earth. Dorian could feel warm blood running down his own back from his wound, but he tried to ignore it as he struggled through the snow after the healer. "Magic, Bard, now!" she shouted. Dorian belted the first few notes of a battle song before he realized he was doing it. Air's magic flared and she lobbed 2 balls of ice, seemingly drawn from the frigid air around them, into the chests of her attackers. "On your left!" Dorian had to dodge to the side as Garvin, clearly finished with his own foes, charged past. The big man's bare arms were covered in shallow wounds, but he didn't seem to notice as he leapt in to aid Air. The healer fell back slightly, rallying, coiling her warm white magic around herself. A tendril of silver reached out to Garvin and healed the deepest of his cuts as he fought. Dorian slumped back, letting the pair clean up the last of the bandits. He wasn't certain why he felt so flustered. He'd been on the field of battle, of war, but this was far more intimate, and he hadn't had soldiers all around to protect him, only a small woman and a man who made some mountains look pathetic. He saw each bandit die in turn, and when the pair were finished, they cleaned their weapons in the snow and moved to rejoin Dorian. "You all right?" Garvin asked. "You're looking a little pale. I thought you said you'd seen battle." Dorian mumbled, looking around at the dead men in the snow. "I can't say I've ever seen a healer kill like that." "Like what, my dear?" Air asked, her manner completely returned. She paused and bent down, pulling up the hem of her skirt to reveal a long slash on her calf. She tutted in annoyance and slid her hand over the wound, white magic flaring. In seconds it was gone. "To be honest, the healers I knew said they weren't allowed to kill. Their god," Dorian tried to explain. "Followers of the god of life and order are often not permitted to draw blood with a blade," Garvin said, laughing lightly as he held out his bleeding arm for Air to see to it. "Their order doesn't say anything about bludgeoning weapons." "Ah," Dorian nodded as though he understood, but wasn't certain he did. "Oh, darling, you're still bleeding," Air gasped, moving to Dorian's side as smoothly as a lady in her own court. She turned him and pressed her hand to his shoulder blade. Dorian instinctively sang a few notes under his breath, aiding her spell. Her perfect lips formed into a smile as she healed him. He felt a rush of warmth and the pain was gone as though it had never been. "Thank you," Dorian said, smiling as well. "Are bandits common in these woods?" He moved with the others to reclaim their mounts. "Not common, no. But every now and then they get ideas," Garvin snorted, mounting his horse from the ground with one swing of his massive leg. "They see me riding through with 2 mages and they think they have a chance." Air snorted as she mounted her own horse, arranging her now bloodied skirt as though it was still pristine. Dorian wondered that she wore white if she made it a habit to slay so many foes personally. Dorian put his foot in the stirrup and clambered onto his saddle, feeling somewhat more invigorated and definitely warmer, though he wished his back wasn't crusted with rapidly drying blood. He turned his new mount and urged it to walk after the healer and barbarian. "Now then," Garvin said, tossing back his head and taking a big breath of icy air, ready to ride on as though nothing had happened, as if his axe wasn't still steaming with the heat of the bodies it had been buried in not long before. "You are about to sing us a song." Guild of Heroes Part 2, coming soon.